I'm so grateful to be here. Thank you to Mary and the entire team. I know what goes into having these types of events. So I would just ask each of y'all to thank them as you see them, because there's a lot that goes into it. So thank you so much for having me. It was quite a feat to get here. So I was actually I had a hunting trip in Johannesburg planned before they had even called me to ask. And I try to consider myself cultured and educated. And I found out quickly that I'm not that cultured and educated, because my response to Dana was like, oh yeah, I'm already going to be in Africa. And then I went to look at flights. I'm like, it was the same distance from Dallas. And so I got myself in trouble leaving Johannesburg. The Australia visa site was down. So I couldn't get a visa to get on the plane, because technology is amazing when it works. And when it doesn't, it's not quite so amazing. So I was able to get on the last flight 10 minutes before they closed ticketing. So poor Mary, I was like, I'm not going to text her until I know that I'm not making this flight. They're like, we can get you there Friday by 6 p.m. I'm like, that's not an option. And then I landed in Perth, and in Perth, they didn't have a ticket for me at Virgin Australia. So I had to figure it out. But we're here, and I firmly believe, from a personal and professional standpoint, anytime there's things that keep us from showing up and things like these obstacles come up, it's because something great's going to happen. And I can tell you, being involved with GWA, being involved with the industry, this is what greatness is, right? And what I love about it is all of y'all coming together, being able to spend time pouring your expertise into each other, right? And so I'll just continue to challenge you guys just to continue having discussions amongst yourselves and just collaborate, right? And I think we're going to get into that this afternoon a little bit on collaboration and competition and how we do those things. But this first session, we're essentially going to talk about 7 trends. I'll tell you, I've got a podcast, he didn't bring that up, with Jamie Russo. It's all right, don't worry about it. It's not that good. And so the podcast is Flex Uncensored for a reason. It truly is uncensored. We don't do any pre-planning. You know, when we first started doing it, they'd be like, okay, so we're going to talk about work. I'm like, do you know who you are and do you know what you do? If you know those things, then we'll be just fine. And so that's kind of what today is. I've got 7 trends. This is going to help me kind of go along the process, but since we wrote this article and everything, things continue to change. We had great conversations this morning during our breakfast. We had a VIP roundtable breakfast, and we'll tap into some of this stuff this afternoon. But this is mainly just meant to be kind of a way to keep me on track and not chasing my ADHD squirrels that are at a rave. So as stuff comes up, you guys ask questions. This isn't meant to be a true keynote. I argued for a panel, or really a fireside chat, in which I was turned down. So please, this is meant to be interactive. And as we get through this, if you've got questions afterwards, I'm here all day. And like I said, I think we're going to do some stuff this afternoon as well. So essentially, the 7 trends shaping co-working in 2025, right? And these things are evolving, right? It's not meant to be the only thing. There's additional things. This kind of on a global perspective, some things that we kind of wanted to run through, right? The first, none of us can avoid the conversation around enterprise, right? And so enterprise is finally starting to buy into what it is that the flex collaborative world is and can be, right? And so depending on where you are in the globe, we're at different places, different stages in that overall evolution, if you will, right? The UK has got a huge buy-in on the Flexible Workspace side of stuff. The US is slowly getting there. I know APAC has done really well, and I think y'all are slowly getting there here as well. And so what that affects is the type of products that we're offering, right? Is what is the enterprise looking for and what are their needs? Most of them don't even know. I'll tell you, I spoke at Coronet 2 years ago in Dubai, and I had the pleasure of doing that with Chelsea with Executive Center. And it was so interesting. Some of the questions we got from the the real estate directors of these companies is like, well, how are y'all creating a product to help us? And I'm like, I don't know what you need, right? It's like they were trying to figure out, and they still are trying to figure out, what are their policies on return to work? What kind of, how many days a week are they requiring? Is it the entire team? Is it hybrid? What is it? And so part of what we're continuing to evolve as operators, as experts in this space, is asking the right questions when people come up, but also asking who and what we are. And we'll get into that, because that's part of it too, is understanding our brand and who we're trying to target, right? If you're a hostel, you're not trying to target a business traveler, right? If you're a company that's focused on resorts, you're not trying to target a hostel traveler a lot of times because they can't afford your prices. And so part of it for us is trying to understand who and what we are. Is that a question or is that a wave? Go for it.
That's a question. So enterprise, do you think of that as a customer or a product or both?
Well, it's a customer. The question is what product does that customer need? Because even during if you think about even in enterprise, what are they looking for, right? Do they need privacy, right? Do they need some type of secure type of networks and stuff? And so that affects that. Do they sit in a team environment? You're going to have an executive that then needs team space, whether it be open desking or some type of bullpen or something like that. And so it's like anything else, is what are their needs and how do we create a strategy to really help them implement those? And so a lot of times I use the example of the dog and the tail, right? Is the dog wagging the tail or is the tail wagging the dog? And so part of it is understanding what you're good at, right? If you are someone that is, call it a CPA, that's not really good at being around people and hospitality, and you're trying to open a hospitality product, you better hire the right people that have that ability to do that. And so I think that's one of the problems we're seeing right now is people are trying to be the jack of all trades, right? They're trying to do everything. And anytime you try to do everything, you're not going to do anything well, right? And so I think that's part of the evolution that we're starting to see is how are these things playing out, right? And these are just a couple little things that we broke out is enterprise adoption. We've kind of talked about large companies using co-working, right? And so as we're starting to see, we're finally getting to the point where there's real data out there. We're no longer theoretically talking about stuff. We now have fobs and scans and sensors and all kinds of stuff. So we can tell you when people are in the office, right? And I can tell you for the most part, a lot of companies, it's a bell, right? Is on Monday and Friday, it's, minimal utilization. Tuesdays and Thursdays picks up and Wednesday's your big day. The problem is you have to build for Wednesday. You can't build for Monday or Tuesday because then people don't have anywhere to go. And the other option is that's how we become an option. So the landlord knows that Wednesday's a big day and that the enterprise user doesn't want to take a big block of space or multiple floors. The best thing they can do is collaborate with one of us as flex operators to go, on Wednesdays, you know what, you have the ability to use these spaces. And that's where those partnerships come in that the last group did such a great job talking about, is going, what value, how do we add value to the landlord? Why do they want to use us as overall options and partners in this space? And so that's a big part of it, is really understanding what it is that we're selling and why we're trying to sell it. Operators meet high standards, IT security, consistency, right? Same thing, I've kind of touched that. What are they trying to look for? What are they trying to achieve? I mean, for example, if we've got something, enterprise or some type of operator that's going in Washington, D.C., a lot of them want skip space. And so skip space is essentially space that's built so that it's fully secure. There's a lot of times it's highly sensitive government data that's being used. And so the requirement they have is all kinds of thicknesses to the wall. There's got to be all kinds of, how's the door work? What's the network system in? And so really trying to understand those things. And so everyone's got a different level. Health. If you're dealing with people's health records, in the US we call it HIPAA. I'm sure y'all have some variation of that here, where you can't just have people's open health records just somewhere that can be accessed by other people. They have to be secured. And so understanding those needs as to when we build out the space, we're trying to do that. And then opportunities via aggregators and corporate brokers. I think someone called it aggravators this morning. But either way, it's really understanding how do we collaborate with those people, right? And so that's been an ongoing issue of what's the buy-in there. And so the question came up earlier of service providers. And I'll tell you, as someone that I was lured into Avis and Young 5-6 years ago, and basically they said they were bought in, and they weren't, right? I bought myself out of my contract after 3 years because I'm like, I am the brand. You guys are not bought in, and that's part of what's not happening here. Obviously, y'all had a great presenter from Colliers, and you got Tashi from JLL, and people that are getting there. But in the U.S., I'll give you the example. In the U.S., brokers still care only about themselves, right? So they figure out what the fee is, and a 10-year fee for a big block of space is a lot higher than a 1-year agreement within one of our spaces, right? And so there has to continue to be buy-in from those. But the crazy part about it is whether you like it or not, they're your partners, right? They're going to bring you business, and you got to find a way to choose who's best and how much you want to invest in the time, energy, and effort to do it. It's hard to put all your information out on all the aggregators, but certainly there's big ones out there that are driving opportunities. I mean, the Instant Group drives a ton of opportunities. Who knows what's going to happen now that Mark's making the decisions, whether those are going just to IWG or they're going to be spread out. Don't smile. You're going to throw me off. I'll say what Daniel won't say. But I think that's part of it, is trying to understand our industry is about collaboration and competition. And so that applies for all of us. Each of you are competing with each other to some extent, but you're also collaborating, right? If you have someone that shows up that needs event space, but you don't have the size event space you need, then you need to be able to collaborate. But I mean, those things all kind of touch into what ultimately your brand is, right? Clarity, vision, strategy are non-negotiables. Know who you are, know your brand, define your niche, analyze competition and culture and community, right? Those are all huge factors, is what makes each of you unique to what you are. You're not all the same, right? And I use Marriott and Bonvoy as a huge example. They got 31 brands and growing now, and everyone is different, right? I'm staying at the W Hotel this time around just because it was convenient and easy, and I knew because of jet lag I wanted to have some of the additional amenities and everything else. And then from here, I go to where I don't even know where I go next. I'm going to Sydney next, thank you. And in Sydney, I'm staying at an Autograph Hotel right off the harbor, which is great. And that's because it gives me the ability to go run and see. I believe that running is the best way to see a new city. And I experienced that. I haven't booked Melbourne yet, but then from there I go to Samoa. And in Samoa, I'm staying at a Sheraton, right? And it's a resort and it's on the beach. And yes, there was a Sheraton in town that was cheaper, but I'm in Samoa. I want to be by the beach, right? So I get to choose my own adventure as I go with those 31 brands. There's times where I'm like, I'm literally going somewhere to put my head down. That's all I need. And I'll stay at a budget-friendly place within that 31 brands. And so the same way applies for us, is what are people looking for? If you're a private equity group, if you're a high net worth attorney, the space you're looking for versus a counselor or an IT group is very different, right? Who's your client, right? Is it a young base where they want it to be like a fraternity out there where they want beer on tap and they want kombucha and all that weird stuff because they don't eat gluten because they may get sick or something like that? This gluten thing is a new thing. I don't get it. I'm like, all of a sudden people are gluten-free and allergic, and if you are, I'm sorry, it's real, I guess. But I think that's part of it, is how are we building for the people and the consumer we're trying to target? And do you even know? I think you would be surprised, and Deborah and I had a great conversation yesterday, and it sounds like her team does a great job, but I get to tour spaces across the entire country. I travel 120 days a year. And so part of that is because I have to be able to walk through space and have conversations, have interactions with people, and really understand what's working, what's not working. And one of the examples I give is, so often my first questions, I tell people I can tell you if a space is successful within 30 seconds of walking into it, right? What does it look like and how am I welcomed? A lot of times I walk in and there's no one to welcome me, and I walk around the entire space by myself and leave, and I'm just like, I can tell why you're 40% occupied, right? There's times where, as I'm touring, I always ask the question from the staff is, what's your background? Where'd you come from, right? A lot of them came from hotels and hospitality, and they got sick of working nights and weekends, right? And they're excited to get their nights and weekends. They were wedding coordinators, and they didn't want to work weekends anymore, but they have that hospitality touch. And so really understanding those things. But the next question I ask is, I'm like, so who's your biggest competitor? Well, it's the Industrious around the space, around the corner. It keeps sticking here. Look at this. Magnets. It's the Workspace 365, or it's, Creative Cube or whatever Toby keeps changing his name from. I can't keep up. You're like Bill Bennett, change your name over and over again. But part of it is, their next answer is, I really don't know, right? I'm like, you've never been to the Industrious around the corner that's your competitor? No. What are you selling against? How do you know how you're different than them? Because what's going to happen is someone's going to come and be like, well, Industrious around the corner is offering me a deal that's 20% cheaper. Well, also, is it on a window line? Is it facing a parking garage? Does it have 24/7 access like we have? Does it have security? Does it have the podcast room, what does it have? And so often it is shocking to me how little people within the space know about their competition, right? And that's really on you owners, right? Is you have to give them the time, effort, you have to give them the ownership to go do those things, and often they don't, right? And if you are an employee and you want to go look at those things, and for some reason your boss, owner doesn't let you, you're going, I can't do my job if you don't allow for me to. And so I think that's what ends up happening is people need to be able to communicate better, even within our group, which kind of leads to the cultural side of stuff. What kind of culture are we building where people want to participate and take ownership and really drive what it is that's exciting about what we get to do, right? I mean, what we get to do, I'm passionate about it, which is why I love doing this, which is why I fly across the world to cover my expenses, and that's it, is because I get to meet all of y'all. I get to go through your space. It's not because I'm making money. I mean, literally, Jamie was like, you're never going to do a deal in Australia, right? And I'm like, I can't even do the conversion from $1 to whatever y'all call yours. So, but I think that's part of it is really understanding what's going on in the industry, and y'all need to know that, right? You need to know that there's more products. When you land at the airport at Brisbane, you type in hotels, how many things pop up, whether you're using Priceline or hotels.com or even something as specific as Hilton or Bonvoy. There's so many different product types that pop up. And so what is special about what you're offering, and how do you go about deploying that? You really have to understand that when you're starting to look at pricing and all those things. And that just takes going out and knowing who and what you are, knowing what you're offering, right? The hospitality component is so big, right? That's what people are willing to pay for. I don't know why people pay for the Ritz-Carlton, because I don't want to nor need to, but there's people that are okay paying $900 because someone knows their name and they get up and they got some fancy bubbly water in their room and everything else. But there's a reason that people do that, and there's a demand for it to some extent, or it wouldn't exist, right? I mean, as I walked here, you pass Louis Vuitton and Bulgari and Tag Heuer and all these places, right? And there's people that'll pay for that, right? They want to stand and let them pass the cute little red rope and walk around and look at stuff, right? And I'm like, you're buying a plastic purse, really? It's not even leather, but it's got an LV on it. But I mean, I think that's part of it, is really understanding what it is that you got. I mean, we're starting to see hyper specialized, right? I represent a group in the US that we've got 18 locations now. Actually started on the podcast, and he didn't want to come on because he's like, oh no, people may know what I'm doing and they're going to do it. And so all they do is co-working for therapists and counselors. And so they build out space for 30 to 40 offices, and it's a waiting room. It's unmanned, unwomaned. It's an iPad, so the counselors know their people are coming, hopefully, and they just click in. And they actually do it. They don't even do it by the office. They do it by the time slot. And they're still signing 6 to 12 month deals, but they may go in and a counselor signs for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 8 a.m. to 11. And so then someone else comes in from noon to 3, and they may have someone from 4 to 7. I'm like, that sounds like an operational nightmare. How do I give you money? So I am literally an investor. I own 5% of that firm now, because it was so unique that I was willing to put my money into it. And I don't do that very often. But it's because they're a specialized niche, right? Then we're starting to see groups that focus just on legal, right? Legal and attorneys. And, that's hyper generalized. And then you've got, in addition to that, people that are focused on enterprise, right? And we only do enterprise space. We're building everything for larger spaces. And I think that's a big risk, but not my money. I want to invest in you. But that's just part of the reality of what's going on, is going, what are you trying to achieve and who are you? I mean, we were talking to Watso earlier, right? And she's like, well, yeah, we get people that do really well in the open desking, because very few people make money in open desking. But again, they know what their model is, right? They're targeting a different type of user, right? A user that's more of a hostel user, a traveler, a backpacker, someone that's got an executive that wants an office, but their people are willing to sit out in the open and do whatever. I don't know what's going on here. Thank you. My presentation's now over. I don't think this ever happened. I got taken off stage quietly. And so I think that's a big part of it, is really understanding that side of stuff, is who are you focused towards? What are you focused towards? So often I talk to people and they're just like, let's go back here so I don't get confused. I talk to people and they're like, oh, it's people that need office. Well, there's a huge difference between what people need and why they need it, right? And so do you understand who your client is and why you're targeting them, right? It's super important to understand that. And what's your exit, right? Back to what they're real estate owners. And that's what I tell people. If you could be a real estate owner and an operator, play the Realco Opco game all day long. Because now your goal is to build equity in your real estate, right? And so, but that's one example. And so knowing what your strategy is huge for being successful. If you don't know what your own strategy is, how can you serve anyone else, right? And so I think that's incredibly important. Genuine care is crucial, right? The relationships is everything. Is your team connecting people? Is someone walking in, and I know you're taking pictures, so I'm sure you can circulate this, right, Mary? Yeah, so you'll circulate, don't worry about taking pictures. And so part of it is, are we connecting people, right? We're connectors. It's about hospitality. Someone walks in, oh yeah, I'm a real estate attorney. Well, that's awesome. We know we have an appraiser that sits back in the corner. We have a real estate architect. We have brokers. And we connect people, right? That's what we create the stickiness, right? The stickiness of people wanting to office with us. The stickiness of people wanting to stay with us when they can get a cheaper rate down the street from somebody else that's trying to squeeze us out, right? Is what are we doing in order to create that feeling of desire for people to stay there, right? And so that takes genuine ability to build connections and everything else, authenticity, service level hospitality. You know, when people ask me who the best operators are, I always say it's the local and regional ones. It's very rarely the bigger groups, because let's be honest, whether it be IWG, ServCorp, Liz, if you're listening, I don't think she is anymore. Those people are just punching it. They're just punching a clock, right? They're going in, they're doing their work, and they're going home. They're not buying into anything. And so for me, you know, the people when Brad or Toby or, you know, any of you walk through your space, not only should all your employees know who you are, but a bunch of your customers should know who you are and who you are, what you do, what they do. And so there's so many different ways to do that in a creative way, whether it be a CMR system that you're basically tracking what people's birthdays are, what their celebrations are. I always use this example. I hate using WeWork as an example, but I will. But I had a friend that essentially bought he was officing at WeWork. He bought a house and he showed up, and there was a care package on his desk for his congratulations on your new home and your 3-year sobriety anniversary. I'm like, I didn't even know you were sober. I knew he didn't drink, but the fact that someone at WeWork knows his sobriety anniversary, that takes real conversation. That takes real desire to know a person and to even track it, right? And so what do we know about our people? Do we know when their anniversaries are? Do we know when, you know, we can celebrate the easy stuff, but it's the important stuff, right? Do we know what someone's kid's favorite sporting team is, right? Do we know, you know, when their wedding anniversary is, and we put a little gift card on their desk that says, hey, by the way, congratulations, you know, go have, you know, a cocktail on us or have dessert or whatever the case is. And so how do we create that ability for desire to want to keep coming back? I call it stickiness. And again, culture consistency is a challenge for large brands, right? I've already tapped on that. And so it's hard to keep track of when it comes to that stuff. Industry, I feel like I'm going cross-eyed. I mean, I'm so close to the screen. Industry consolidation underway. We're seeing it, right? You heard me bring it up earlier with, this is going to be a problem. You think I'd learn eventually. But, I mean, you heard me bring it up earlier with CBRE and Industrious, right? And for many of you, if you don't know or you don't remember, the way that whole thing started is CBRE thought they were going to be smart enough and create HANA, and they quickly realized, oh crap, this is not as easy as we thought it was going to be. And I want to say they spent $425 a foot to build out, and someone do the math in Aussie. I can't do that again. But it's 3 times more than anyone else was spending. And because they had Gensler this and, you know, Steelcase that, and they had like a touch, like you could look at the machine and make the coffee just by you thinking about what you wanted. It was the weirdest thing, but it wasn't successful. So what they did is they had to go invest in Industrious so that they could have someone take care of their problem, and then realized, oh man, this is kind of a good idea. Our enterprise clients are interested. Our landlord clients are interested. We can grow our management business side. and now they own the entire thing, right? So you've seen that consolidation. You've seen, Yardi, who we have a new Aussie person from the UK that moved here, and Yardi is a good example. Anant Yardi saw the need, and he actually spoke at the Global Workspace Association last year, and it's like 3% of his business. It was funny when he bought it, everyone's like, oh my gosh, he's going to steal all our stuff and our clients, and it's like, it's 3%. And he literally sat there and he's like, it's not worth my reputation to do that, right? I just see the need and the demand, and I see the opportunity, and that's why he invested in it, right? And so you've got those investments. Then you have groups like, IWG buying Instant and ruining that. And then you've got other groups that I'm going to be in so much trouble. Does a cease and desist work if I'm in Australia when I say these things? I love you, Mark. You didn't send me my last bonus. But I think those are all big factors. And so, part of it is we talked about it. You're seeing the shift towards managing agreements. And in the US, it's so interesting. And I'm so glad John was up there and led that conversation, because people use the word management agreement like it's either a traditional deal or it's a management deal. They don't take into mind what a hybrid deal is, what a partnership is, what a JV is. And so being able to have those conversations, and you guys are at a different cycle where you're actually getting the deals done, and it doesn't feel like it, but I'll tell you, I've done 105 deals and I've done 2 management deals. And the reason is because it's not worth my time, energy, and effort. And I don't mean that in an ugly way. I get paid to do deals. And for every one deal, I think this used to be at WeWork, is that right? How many people were chasing this deal? Probably 10 different operators were chasing it. Congratulations, you won it. But for me, I'm working on deals that I have better than a 10% chance of winning, because that's what my time, energy, and effort's worth, right? And so understanding what those deals look like, having people like the Colliers team that can help you through that, those don't exist in the rest of the world very much, right? And so, like I'll tell you, I go to GWA or Juicy, and I'm one of like 3 brokers, and the other 2 worked for me at one point, and I love them to death. They're great, but we have different skill sets. But there isn't like any of the big companies are not showing up, because in the US, at least, they're so focused on getting their 4.5%, regardless if it's the right thing or not for enterprise. And so we're going to continue to see the evolution of management deals. Independents remain agile and connected, right? You guys, the question came up this morning at breakfast is going, well, everyone's growing around us and all these things are changing. They're not going to stop, right? Just because someone opened up a new hotel, Hilton and Marriott didn't throw up their hands, or Autograph didn't throw up their hands before they were acquired by Hilton. They just figured out, how do we offer a different product, right? And so that's what you guys need to be is, oh my gosh, these people open around us and they're trying to take, well, how are you different than them? In all reality, if they just open now, you're probably 4, 5, 6, 7 years behind in a good way, from the standpoint of your rent is probably 20, 30% cheaper than their rent. What they do have on you is they probably, if they're smart, which not everyone is, unfortunately, they built the space more efficient, right? And so they can't afford the larger rent. So now you got to go, okay, do I need to go back and renegotiate my deal and take a different floor and build out the floor more efficiently, right? I'll tell you, what's moving the most across the world is 55 square feet. That's a closet. But people no longer they don't need a file cabinet. It's a laptop that you open up. They have the ability to step out and use a conference room. They have the ability to use breakouts, all this stuff, right? And so those of you that have older centers, your offices are 120, 150 square feet, which is super inefficient. And so how are you finding a way to compete with what's out there, right? Because competition isn't going to stop. It's just going to get harder. We just got to figure out how do we number one, do you even want to be in the business anymore, right? Because there's some people that are choosing not to, right? Because things are going to get hard. But that's any type of competition, right? And the second part is, I tell people there's 3 things you can't recover from: a bad location, a bad real estate deal, and a bad deal structure. And a bad build out, right? And so those are all 3 very costly things before you even open the doors, right? And then from there, because you can shift and adapt, you can change from Yardi to Census if you want, because the Census can't figure out what they're doing, right? Mark can't even decide if he's retired or not. He just, am I going back? I need another supercar. Thanks for the drinks last night, Mark. But I think that's a big part of it is really understanding, who it is and why you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing it because you're trying to make money? There's people that are doing this just because they need a paycheck, right? And that's perfectly fine. They're not trying to build some empire, but what's your exit? What are some of those things that are coming up? Strong brands with clear value. I've touched on that already. Is you have to understand what is your value. Why do people want to come work with you? 6, operator-landlord relationships. We beat this one to death pretty well. But the last panel did a great job talking about this, is how do we, and I think you said sell, and you're like, oh, we're not selling, we're selling. We're always selling because we have to convince, or I think it was you, Sherry, that said selling. How do we convince the landlord that this is the right idea for them? And it really is if they're long-term holders. It really is if there is dynamics within their space that they need to basically shift and adapt to the enterprise user, right? If they've got a big group that's got 4, 5, 6 floors in the entire building and they know they're going to use less utilization, how are they keeping them in the building? Well, you have to change the overall business plan for your space, right? And what are you trying to achieve by that? I walk in buildings sometimes and I'm like, okay, you've got a management office here that is run by CBRE, then you have a security desk run by ADT, and then you go over here and there's a coffee shop that's run by someone else. I'm like, how do you keep track of that, right? And so at one point, it was pretty funny. I walked into a CBRE location and Regis had just opened there and they closed like a year after. They built a really bad spaces deal there. But you walked in, there was a security desk and then they're like, oh yeah, then you go to conference facility over here that they put together. It's like ABT. And I'm like, okay. And then they're like, oh yeah, and then we have this little coffee bar over there that's called 123. And I'm like, these all overlap. I mean, why do you have all these options, right? There should be a concierge desk that covers all those things. And that's what they've put Jamie in charge of now that the CBRE Industries acquisition has gone through. His job is to go figure out their management side of business, right? Because our goal is, how do we manage the entire building, right? How do we figure out how to do yoga on Monday mornings and do a ice cream social on the rooftop on Thursdays? And, how do we handle security so that people feel like it's a concierge type of service and not someone that's just there to pretend like they're going to keep anyone safe but couldn't. We'll leave it at that. What else? I'm going the wrong way. I'm running out of slides. I hope you got questions. 7, global trends, regional nuances, right? And I think that's a big part of it. The way things are done in North America, Latin America, core trend specialization, how way things are done in APAC, everything else is really understanding those things. Are you going out and understanding what's going on, right? It's real easy to say, I can't afford to go to the US, to go to GWA, or to go to Europe and see what's going on out there with, man, I forgot. John Reeves is going to hate me. What is it? Coworking Europe? Is he Coworking Europe? I don't know. But what is happening in other parts of the world, right? And so learning and growing from that is so important, because sometimes we get stuck in this little silo and the bubble. I mean, even going and seeing what's going on in Melbourne, what's going on in Sydney, what's going on in the Gold Coast, and going and having those conversations. And the beauty of it is there's 112 of you, I think, that fill these seats. Y'all are coming from all kinds of places. You got all kinds of information. Ask each other, right? That's the beauty of these events. And what I love and am so passionate about this industry is everyone is so open to conversations. And so often, I'll tell you, I walk in to meet with people and sometimes they're like, well, we need you to sign an NDA. And I'm like, for what, right? I've forgotten more than you know. And it's not because I'm smart. It's because I get to talk to a lot of smart people like y'all. I get to jump on a plane and go look at your spaces. And so I get to take that information back. You guys are no different, right? And so that's why you paid to fly here or drive here, or that's why you paid for your ticket, is to hear about what's going on out there. So have the conversation. You've got really smart people in this room that have solved problems that you've got. So they've solved problems that they've seen in other places. And so I think that's the beauty of our industry, is that collaboration. And so how do we break through to be able to have that, right? How do we break through and be able to share information? Like I think it was John or someone mentioned earlier, from the valuation standpoint, if I want to value a hotel, I can, in the US, I don't know what it's called here, but I can go buy a star report that tells me all the hotels in the market. It tells me how many rooms there are, what their occupancy is, what their average rate is. We don't have that because it's like we're holding everything so tight. no offense to these people again, but you got Instant that has their database that's like, oh my gosh, I can't share it with you. But Yardi has the exact same database. They just got to have a different set of nerds in India putting it together. And it's not about India. It's about the fact that you've got people that are putting data together, different parts of the world that are putting data together, and we act like we have something special, right? It's like, why aren't we collaborating and sharing those things? Why aren't we adding the value that we have internally to go compete, right? We're talking about valuation. Well, how do we create that valuation? How do we grow those things if we can't do it within our own collaborative tribe and industry, right? How do we expect CBRE, JLL, Colliers, everyone else to figure those things out if we don't want to share that information with ourselves, right? And so if you want to see change, if we want to drive that, it's got to start with us, right? And so, we were having the conversation about sessions this afternoon, and it was like, well, we need to go, let's talk about what we can go to change those things. Well, it's got to start here before we go start lobbying somewhere to change laws about how people view our space. It's going, are we all on the same page? Are we all collaboratively rowing in the same direction? And I don't care whether it's GWA or Juicy or, you're Co-working Europe or FWA here. I mean, we're all trying to grow the industry, right? And so it's like, how do we continue working together and doing that? So again, we're building it out for that, right? If you go to Regis or any of your spaces, some of you have counselors, and it's horrible because because there's an ugly little sound machine outside the door, and you're just like, that looks so bad. So we build the spaces out for that, right? So we put extra insulation in the walls. We put a white noise system in the ceilings. So it's built specific, but I'll tell you, like, for example, we have to put lights in, but we don't keep the lights on. We do sconces along the hallway, so it feels like you're kind of at a spa, right? And so I don't care where you are in the world, going and having mental health struggles is still very taboo, as sad as that is, right? We all have them, whether you admit it or not. You do, especially Brad. And so, hey, don't laugh back there. You were with them. But either way, that's part of it is, we're building specifically for that, right? We're not saying you're going into some random space. We're literally building for that use. That's that hyper specialization is we're taking all that in account. Like, even if it's awesome to find spaces already built just because construction prices are so high, but we specifically literally will walk into a space and be like, okay, one of the owners will go on that side and I'll scream and we'll see how much you can hear. Right? And so that's part of it too, is really being aware of what the need is and going, because even if you take a space that's already built out, you can spray insulation in between the walls. You can put a white noise system in this, and that's just part of it is, do you understand what the need? You understand what the need is. You're just stuck in this box, no offense, where you're like, well, how do we resolve that? It's pretty simple, right? And it's just thinking outside the box and and it costs a little bit of money, but it's a lot cheaper than having to build a whole new space. I mean, ultimately, I don't think there's going to be as much drastic change as we think, right? And as someone that spent 10 years in retail, I remember 15 years ago when Amazon started popping up, it was like, oh my gosh, brick and mortar's dead. What's going to happen? No, it just looks different, right? And so to answer your question is, a Marriott still looks like a Marriott, right? A Hilton still looks like a Hilton, but now you've got other brands. You've got a co-working space that is, therapy driven. You have another one that is driven to, Salon Suites, right? Salon Suites is all over the world. You guys managed to take advantage of it here and you added modern, spin to it and everything else. But those things haven't shifted. It's just new products are being done and how we deploy stuff, right? Someone was asking about AI this morning during the breakfast. AI is here whether we like it or not, right? So how do we adapt to it? But AI is not going to, maybe someone's going to go put on goggles and do whatever weird thing they do with them in an office, but they still need the office to go do that. They're not going to do it from home because you still have a dog, you still have a spouse, you still have a doorbell, you still have poor internet, right? And so what's going to shift is new product types, new offerings, right? How are you thinking outside the box? Who would have thought 10 years ago we'd be building podcast rooms inside of our spaces? Who would have thought that I was in, I don't even remember what space I was in yesterday, but now we had, you have the telephone booths, right, which have been around for a while, but now you actually have office booths where people are building offices where we're, like, for example, if we're going to try to build out a bunch of offices in here, for us to go out and physically build it out with all the MEPs that we got to move it's really difficult, but can you move in a pod here that allows for us not have to worry about MEPs, right? So we're seeing more and more of that, those types of spaces that are mobile, right? And how do you build around that rather than have to worry about all those things? We are enterprise going to continue growing. Where does it end up? I don't know, right? I mean, I think it's a shift, but the reality is, I mean, think about your laptops. Some of y'all are old enough to remember this, and some of y'all are old enough to remember that, and then some. But at one point, how big were Ataris or computers, the big IBMs that you plugged into a wall, right? They took up an entire room, and you needed AC and all those things. Now we have, I mean, look at this little thing that you can do everything from this. It's got the keyboard and everything. People aren't going back to plugging into a wall. These things, right? I mean, there was a time where you had a cord and you could ring around it. You had to do everything. And now with this thing, you can do everything, right? And so we're not going back to that. COVID changed how we work dynamically, and it's never going to go back. It's going to look different. But at the same time, if I'm a restaurant, and a restaurateur that was looking at getting in the business explained this to me really well. We were trying to figure out how do we build out the space. And he said, Giovanni, I want all 2 to 4 person offices. And again, I want to be clear, I'm not saying this is how you do it. This was his idea, right? And the way he explained it, and his father had been in the restaurant business for over 20 years. And he basically had bought his father out. And he said, we realized that we want all four tops. We don't want any 6 tops or 8 tops, because when a 6 top or an 8 top is open, it's hard to fill, right? And so it's awkward to put 2 people at a 6 or 8 top. And he said, we realized that we could put 2 4 tops together, right? Or we could put 3 4 tops together. And you know what? If those people decided they wanted to go somewhere else because they didn't like the way the space was built out, we were willing to lose the business. But in their mind, turning away people was worth having the ability. I mean, it's great when you've got a 6, 8, 10, 12, 40 person office and you have it leased, but when it's not, how long does it take you to lease it, right? And so to that point and the strategy is, the way you build out space now is, I tell my clients, when we build out space, the walls in between, we're very careful where we put the electrical and the networking, all that, because we charge. If you want to combine these, you know what? We'll charge you to open the space and we'll charge you to close it back up. And if you don't like it, then we're probably not the right fit for you, right? And so it just goes back to answer your question is, we're just going to continue to see new products, new hyper focus on things. But at the end of the day, a hotel room is still a hotel room, right? And I think we overcomplicate things. And yes, now you got an Airbnb and you got all these other options, but there's people like, I won't stay at an Airbnb because if I have a problem, I want to be able to go downstairs and talk to someone and have it resolved, right? And you don't get that in Airbnb. You have to wait for them to text you back. And if the toilet stopped up, they're not like, oh, well, move over 1 unit or whatever the case is. And so it's just trying to understand better of how are we shifting and adapting. I mean, using retail again, is retail didn't go anywhere, right? It's just now you got bounce parks and trampoline parks and, all kinds of things that has shifted and adapted to that space, because it's still good real estate. The highest and best use may change. So there's a group out of Denver that's called Shift. And so they have a culinary concierge. So there's a young lady that her job is solely to create CRM. So to create the data in order to do that. And so every day they have 4 centers. And so she kind of shifts around the different centers. And so the example I gave is the first time I met with them, I was in the office with the owner, Grant, and she walks by with a little cart and little cups about this big, and she goes, would you like a macchiato? And I was like, I don't even know what a macchiato is. I don't drink coffee. And so they explained it to me, and her job is to literally go office by office and offer people a macchiato that day. And some days it may be a smoothie, some day it may be a ceviche, type of offering that people come down to. But her job is, she'll walk up and be like, Daniel, how's your weekend? It's a Monday, and Daniel's like, oh yeah, it was a great weekend. It was Johnny's birthday. Okay, well, how old is Johnny? What did Johnny celebrate? Well, he loves Power Rangers, and that's his favorite thing. And I don't know, hopefully he'll grow out of it, but the pink Power Ranger is his favorite. It's kind of weird, but how many people can I offend in one conversation? But either way, and then she's like, all right, well, that's awesome. And what's your week look like, Daniel? And he's like, well, I've got a dinner with my wife on Thursday. It's our anniversary, and we're going to go to Babe's Chop House. And she goes, all right, well, how long have you been married? It's going to be our 17th year anniversary, and it's the best decision I've ever made. All right, well, Daniel, have a great day. And as she's walking away, she's got her little iPad, and she's writing everything down. And I said it earlier, so Daniel shows up on Thursday morning at his desk, and he's got an envelope on his desk that says, hey, here's a $20 gift card so you can buy 2 drinks or get dessert, right? It's that simple, right? Is we make it so complicated. Her job is to do that all week long. That's her sole job. And sometimes it's ceviche down with people going down there and connecting people and hearing interactions.
But that means that that company, for example, this year value of hiring someone that is actually these people.
Yeah, he charges 25% more than anyone else in the market, literally, because he can. Why do, like you heard me say it earlier, I won't pay for the Ritz-Carlton regardless of what it is or anything else, but there's someone that will, right? There's someone that'll pay to walk in and buy a plastic purse that has LV on it. That's just the reality. Doesn't mean it's me, right? And so that's just it, is understanding who the customer is and what they want. And you can't do that without having that kind of information, right? How do you know someone's sobriety anniversary? How do you know when someone's struggling? I mean, I'll get into it, and I have no problem with it because it's so important. Mental health is huge for what we get to do, is we bring people together that are locked at home. 3 months ago, I didn't know if I was going to make it here because I was struggling with my own mental health stuff. And I still remember being in Boston with Liz, and Liz being like, you know what? I've got people that I love and I'm close to, they're just struggling with it. And I'm in the back of the room. I'm waiting for her to call me out, and I'm totally fine with it. She could have. We've got people, and they've been on the podcast, and I know them well, that literally she was domestically abused. And the one thing that she says saved her life was her community. She was a community manager because she got to come in and people got to love on her and take care of her. And so that's part of what our job is. Do we know what people are going through, right? Are we asking the right questions? One of the things I hate the most is when you're walking by someone and you're like, hey, how are you? And I keep walking. I didn't even stop long enough to hear what her answer was. Maybe she needed to talk. Maybe she needed that interaction. That's what y'all all get to do. We get to help people through their lives, right? I don't think we take that seriously enough, right? I'm all about building community. And I understand we have to make money first, but at the same time, the way we create the stickiness, I mean, literally, I've got clients whose members came to them and said during COVID, you know what? I can't afford it, but I'm not leaving because I know you're in the same situation, but I can pay you 60%. That doesn't happen unless you've created a bond with people, right? I mean, we can argue all day long that Juicy and GWA are competitors. No, I love Liz. I position Liz every chance I can and tell people to go to Juicy, right? And it's the same way around, you know? It's like, how are we serving people is really what we ultimately get to do, right? And if you look at it that way, that changes everything. That's what hospitality is about. If you're not passionate about serving people and giving back, you're never going to be successful. Your staff's not going to be successful. You're not going to be successful. I mean, that's just the reality of it. I mean, I'm sitting here and y'all are laughing and I'm joking about different stuff, but that's part of it. Is our job is to connect with people, right? Our job is to make people feel seen and heard and all those things. And I just don't think we take that as seriously as we should, right? But that's what makes these communities really flourish. Where that shifted, right? If you think about what a two to three person office was 5 years ago with a 60-inch desk, because you had a desktop and you had a filing cabinet, you had all that. I mean, literally, we got spaces that are using a 24-inch desk. I mean, and so that's the reality. Is what hasn't shifted now is the size of the space. The need for the size of the space has shifted, right? And so again, people don't need a file cabinet anymore, right? That's what we have our laptops for and our iPads and everything else. And so there's been such a shift and a change in that. And so part of it is figuring out how many desks you can fit in there based off of your need, right? And so how do we service that? Does that answer your question, Michael?
It does.
Okay.
All right. Well, we got to wrap.
I'll be at the principal's office.
Well done, Gio.
Thanks again.
Gio, we really appreciate you.